Hey y'all, welcome back to another episode of Raw Recovery, the community. I am your host, Dannie Shields, and I have with me my guest, Heather. As we've explained on several episodes, everybody's recovery is different. We're not all just recovering from drugs and alcohol or addiction. Some of us are recovering from some long-time trauma and even abandonment issues. And it's hard to talk about those topics, especially if you've never experienced it for yourself. We do have Heather, who is willing to share some of the things she's been through in her past and what recovery looks like for her today, and how she's even been able to start her recovery journey. So we're just gonna get right into it and give her the floor and just let her briefly introduce herself. Heather, can you just tell me who you are as a person today? Who is Heather?
I want to first start by thanking you for inviting me on your show.
Yes.
Really a pleasure
Thank
to
you for
be
being
here.
Mm-hmm.
Who am I today? In simple terms, I'm just a girl.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just a girl that wants to be cherished and loved on and cared for. And I just want to exist in that space, and be comfortable,
Right?
And not have to put on any airs of being the strong Black woman. I just want to be able to, enjoy being who God blessed me to be.
Mm-hmm. That was very well said. So, with who you've been able to become today, and the type of person that you're trying to be, it didn't start off like that. You didn't, right? So let's take it back a little bit for the people. We've spoken several times previously, and I remember you were sharing with me. So for context, we're shooting in New York. Heather is here by way of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, but she's not a Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania native. You actually come from Chicago. Is that where you were born, or?
No, I was actually born in Chicago. Mm-hmm. I had a period of time in my childhood where I lived in Africa, in Nigeria with my father, and then back to Pittsburgh, and then to Chicago during my middle school years, and then back to Pittsburgh.
Wow,
where I've stayed since.
That's a lot of back and forth. Especially during those early years when a person's trying to figure out who they are as a person. Can you tell me what that was like for you? What your life was like with that constant back and forth traveling?
As a child, I don't think I can recollect what it was like. I think it was just part of my story. But my experiences that, I think stuck with me more were coming back from Africa, grade school, coming back from Africa, and then middle school. Those years had some left some very core memories for me. Coming back from Africa, I had a strong accent, because I'd been there for almost a year and a half. And so, kids are not nice. They're very cruel. So being in grade school, coming back and, dealing with those things, that was difficult and challenging to deal with. Even to the point where it impacted my identity. It made it so that I was not proud to be who I was, So that was my grade school experience. And then I ended up going to middle school in Chicago, which actually was an amazing experience because growing up in that diverse community, I did not deal with the same type of bullying and mean intentions that I dealt with when I was in grade school. It was just a different experience.
Grade school was in Pittsburgh.
Yeah, grade school in Pittsburgh. Very black and white community. And anything different was treated as different.
That's something that people don't know about Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. It's no room to be really your own person because the judgment is crazy there. So I can only imagine what that was like. If you're not from Pittsburgh, and if you are from Pittsburgh, you know exactly that feeling of all eyes on you when you're in Pittsburgh. It's so small.
Absolutely. I mean, everybody knows everybody. Right. And if you don't know somebody, you know somebody that knows somebody.
You better believe it.
So I think there's 3 degrees of separation from the person you may know or not know. And I having the opportunity to move to Chicago at that, right after having that experience really opened my eyes, because, all the other moving I was doing as a younger child didn't have that big of an impact. I was just a kid, I was just a baby. But going to Chicago as a middle schooler, experiencing the culture, developing the friendships that I developed, that to this day I still, am connected with those core relationships, gave me a whole different outlook on the world. Right. It made the world bigger for me. Right. It didn't make it just my existence in Pittsburgh as being, in a black and white, context. And then being this little Nigerian girl that wasn't treated very kindly, So Chicago, opened up a new experience, I went to bar mitzvahs. I, engaged with children from, China, Vietnam, Iran, Pakistan, like all different cultures. And it was, they say New York was the melting pot, but Chicago, my gosh, very diverse, amazing culture and next there.
If I'm coming from Pittsburgh too, coming to New York, it's just like, I never even knew what halal food was. You get what I'm saying? So it's just like, in Pittsburgh, it's like you said, it's black. We got black people, we got white people, might see a few Asians, you know what I'm saying? But we don't have Latinos. We don't have, like, the cops are either black and white. The first time I seen a cop that wasn't either black or white is when I moved to New York. Yeah. You see a Muslim cop, somebody with a turban on, you see, just not a black and white. And, I wonder what it was like. Was it, would you say it was kind of like a culture shock coming from Africa? And even though you were here first, but like going to Africa and then coming back here, was that?
I don't know if it was a culture shock. I just remember feeling not liked, not accepted, feeling out of place, feeling like I was an intrusion, in all aspects, of my life. So culture shock, I don't know if that's the language I could even use at the time. I just, I was glad to be stateside, back home with family that I felt, like I knew. But that there was always that feeling of something's not quite right, and I couldn't figure it out for a long time, so.
With those feelings, who did you really have to lean on? And the reason I'm asking is because I'm shifting into what was your relationship like with your parents? Having parents that, they weren't both in the same household. One wanted you in Africa, one wanted you here. What was that time as a child like and what type of relationship did you have with your parents?
Well, once I came back to America, it seemed as if all ties with my father were severed. I had a lot of mixed feelings about the whole transition. I knew I wanted to be with my mom and, my grandma and, my family here in America. And the narrative that was spun to me as a child was that everything about Nigeria and Africa was bad. The whole experience was bad. I've since come to realize that it wasn't all bad. But when you're a child and you're impressionable, and your dominant parent speaks to you, it speaks those things to you, that's all you know. You don't know anything, and there was nothing to challenge it. it wasn't like my father showed up and said, no, that's not what it was. That's not how it was with you. This is what we did. These are the things. This is the evidence of what we did. Here's some pictures to prove, that you did have a good life when you were over here in Nigeria. So for a long span of time, the narrative that I lived with was that I was kidnapped by my father, taken away to another country, and that my mom had to work, hard to, get a job at the airlines, and eventually was able to qualify to get buddy passes to be able to fly her and my grandfather and my grandmother over to find me in Nigeria. And that was an adventure and journey for them. So that was the journey that, that was a narrative that I lived with for a long time, that everything that had to do with Africa and Nigeria and my dad was all bad and negative and evil. And that, that she was my, my savior.
Like your savior, right? Yeah, right.
My savior that came to rescue me.
So how was your relationship with your mom, aside from her, giving you different stories of how your actual relationship is with your father? Since you're with her the most, what was it like growing up?
Well, interestingly, the beginning parts that I do remember were me feeling adoration. I put her on a pedestal, like she could do no wrong in my eyes. And I don't know, that's probably something that all children probably feel about their parents at some point, until, some of the dust starts to clear off, and, there's things that you just can't deny anymore. You start to grow up, you start to mature as a kid, and all the lessons that your parents have taught you about right and wrong, those wrongs start to show up, in your parents, and you're like, wait a minute, that's wrong, isn't it? And then you start to see your parents kind of twitch a little bit and get uncomfortable with the accountability, but shuffle it under the carpet and say, I'm grown. I'm grown, So ultimately, there was a period of time when I, as an observant child, I started to I didn't see some things and then point them out. And in that day, you didn't do that.
Right.
You didn't. Children were still, it was still the children are heard and not, they're seen but not heard. So I certainly should not have ever had a voice to have the nerve to point anything out. Do what you're supposed to do what you're told, not as you see, but as you're told. And that's all there is to it, and conform to whatever is going on, Right. But I have to say that never sat well with me. So it did ultimately cause conflict between my mother and I, especially the times when she would express her hatred for my father, and anything that had to do with, my Nigerian culture. And as we know, as one individual person, we are a combination of both parents. So you can't split a person in half. You can't say, I'm going to accept your American side that resembles me, and completely reject and shun and abuse your Nigerian side. But that was my existence, as a child. That was ultimately what it boiled down to. Now, I can't tell my mother's story as to why it is that was the way she ultimately, carried her behaviors out and, took things out on me. But that was my existence. That was my lived experience, with her, was that I ultimately was that person that she never accepted. She rejected, So I think that definitely played into the feelings of being unwanted, being rejected, and some of the maltreatment that I experienced as a child.
Wow. But aside from just how you felt or you were feeling, she was also, because you and I have spoken previously, I remember you shared that she would display that, the way she would act is giving valid reason as to how you're feeling. Can you even tap into some of the conversations that you guys have had where she made you feel that she did not want you, made you feel unwanted?
I think that for a lot of my childhood, the behaviors were there, but there was never the conversation. Mm-hmm. It was just the way she treated me. One of the things that we don't give children credit for is their intelligence and their insight, their ability to see things, feel things, perceive things, and understand things, even as children. And I had that perception, and I made people feel uncomfortable because I was able to perceive those things. I wasn't just some dumb kid sitting around, just existing. Mm-hmm. I had opinions. I saw things. I felt things. And so, however, I wanted to not believe what I felt. Mm-hmm. I wanted to not believe it. So when my mother would express verbally sentiments towards me, like, calling me her smeggle and her little girl and things like that, I wanted that. I wanted to hold on to it. I wanted to be her little girl, mm-hmm. And I would rather hold on to that and embrace that as my reality than the truth, mm-hmm. But as time went on, I could not deny it anymore. And especially as I became a teenager, mm-hmm. And although Chicago was indeed one of the best experiences I had, it was also the worst because I was living with her solely by myself. It was just her and I in Chicago. And so I was completely subjected to whatever she was struggling with, whatever she was battling with, whether it was mentally, physically, emotionally. I was subjected to all that. And there was really nobody there to cover me, to protect me. So ultimately, it wasn't until I was in my 20s, and her and I were having a back and forth conversation. And she finally just said, I never wanted you. Wow. I never wanted you. I'd never liked you. And it was a bittersweet moment for me because, and I had been wrestling with it myself, how I was feeling about how she felt about me. Wow. And when that came up, when she said it, I was like, thank you. Thank you. Thank you for finally telling the truth. Because I had grown up believing that people could never feel that way about someone else. Like, we were raised, treat others the way you want to be treated. You're supposed to love everybody, as children of God, you're supposed to love everybody. You know what I'm saying? So, especially your child, right. It was inconceivable to me that could really be her feelings towards me. But it made sense. It made so much sense. Right. And if falling for the first time, I was like, I'm not crazy. Right. Because that's how I felt. Right. I felt crazy. I felt like, but she's telling me she loves me. I love you. There's nothing I would do for you. There's no one that can do anything more for you than me. You'll never get anybody to do anything more for you than I can do for you. So there was the gaslighting, stuff going on. So I wanted to believe it. I was a kid that just wanted her mommy to love her and accept her. You know what I mean? So when she told me the truth, it relieved me, but then it also made me spiral because it's like, now what? Right. I know we'll get into it in the, later in the conversation, but I now have 3 children. And for the first time, my mom has told me the truth about how I feel, how she feels about me. And now I have to figure out what all this means in my life, And so it took me, till I was 30 to finally, have a moment of, okay, that was rough. That was rough. and I didn't have any therapy to help me.
Right.
I tried, here and there, tried to get into therapy, but nothing consistent to help me figure out who I was, and I just focused in on my kids. I just focused in on my kids.
When you were, I want to take it back a little bit, because when we were first introducing you, we stated that, you're in recovery from abandonment, recovering from abandonment and some trauma. With abandonment, when did you, even if you didn't know the words, you know the word for it now, but when did you first feel abandonment? Like, what did it feel? What was the feeling? Even though you didn't have the word for it as a child, what was that feeling? Alone.
Scared. Always scared about something. As I consider myself to be a scaredy cat, but I was always afraid about something. I didn't know what I was afraid of, but I was always afraid, and I was always lonely. By myself. I just felt like I was always by myself, no one to really talk to, no one that I didn't feel like anybody really cared. I was just there. Wow. I felt like I was just existing and taking up space, even though my mom, my grandmother, and my grandfather came to get me in Nigeria, it was like once I was back in America,
right.
Everybody was kind of going through the motions, but it didn't feel like a real, like, oh, we're so glad to have you home. We want to make sure that you're safe. What do you need? Being in Africa, I had malaria. And so I'm always sick. It's you get it from mosquito. They carry germs, and I had it. I was really sick all the time, and so I had to get into. I remember one of the ways that they dealt with my fever, my high fevers, that they would put me in a bucket of ice. Now, athletes do that, but they're mentally prepared for that, to get into a bucket of ice to soothe their muscles and stuff like that. Nobody prepared me for them putting me in a bucket of, ice water to help me. And I just remember like jumping out, like, oh my gosh, my whole body just tensed up. Getting the injection for the medicine, because I was so thin, I could feel the needle in my bone, of my rear end. When we talk about trauma, the impact of childhood trauma and how it affects individuals, adults, to this day, I still have a problem with cold water. Like the water has to be just right when I jump in the shower, when I get in the shower. Like I don't like the idea of putting the water on and then waiting for it to warm up, because the water hitting my body triggers me.
Wow.
To this day.
I mean, because we really do all have our own little triggers. A smell can send me through it. You were saying how those experiences still show up in the woman that you are today. This leads me into my next question. How do you feel those behaviors that you adapted from feeling the sense of abandonment, how do you feel those behaviors have carried over? Like, how do you move in the world because of the behaviors you learned? Like, you had to pick up on certain behaviors when you feel scared, when you feel alone, when you feel abandoned. Like, how is that showing up for you on how you move daily? And good or bad, though. Yeah. Like you just mentioned about the showers. How is that affecting you moving day to day?
Well, what I started to learn about myself, especially through assessments. I worked at an agency for almost 10, 15 years that focused on self-awareness, mental health, owning who you were, and then, finding out what your gifts and talents are and things like that. Did one of the assessments and found out that I was a people pleaser. A really bad people pleaser, which means I have no identity of my own, because I exist to please the person that I'm in company with, because I'm so thankful that they're there.
Oh, wow.
That they even see me, that they're willing to be in my company that I just want to do everything that I can to keep them there as long as possible. I don't want to do anything to make them want to not be there and not like me. That is something I think I recognize it now. So I'm actively, doing self-talk to not be like that. But that was a major thing for a long time. I felt
so
like,
much sense.
I feel like, oh my gosh, you see me? Okay, good. You see me. Okay. You like me? Mm-hmm. Okay. And so that, that led into a lot of my friendships, my relationships with men. If you saw me and I felt safe with you and I felt cared about by you, even if it was a fleeting moment, if you were able to catch my attention enough to get me to see that you actually do like me and you see me and care about me, you make me feel safe, wow. Then, I'm in. Even if it was just a ruse, even if it was just a short moment, even if it was just for the other person's motives, because sometimes people do stuff like that. They're nice to you for their own motives. You know what I mean? But I didn't know how to discern that. I just liked being liked in the moment. It felt good. If I felt loved, I felt cared for in the moment. And then, like life does, it's not about just making me feel good or making me feel liked. I needed so much more than that. And I wasn't going to get them in these relationships, so I would find myself that once those relationships were no longer feeling that need, that I would ultimately, pull away, I didn't realize what I was doing, until more recently, but I was looking for that love and acceptance that I didn't get as a child. That's all I wanted. I just wanted to be that little girl.
You're basically answering what I wanted to ask. Let's say the cards were different and you were raised by someone who genuinely wanted you, even if it was on a different continent. How do you think that would have shaped who you are today? Just knowing, like having the experience, because you just said these different relationships, the people pleasing, but if you had that in the beginning, aside from not struggling with people pleasing, how do you think you would have turned out differently?
Well, when I look at the woman that I am today, where I do less people pleasing, it's still there. I know it is. But I would be more confident. I'd be more carefree. I'd be more loving, like genuinely just a loving, happy, caring, giving person that I am. Not giving because I want you to like me, but giving because that's in my nature. I'm a servant. I'm a servant leader. I'm tough. I am dogmatic. I like to get things done. I like to take charge. And a lot of the natural born qualities that I have are not likable. So I would hide them. I would reduce myself to be less than who I was, because those are qualities and attributes that push people away.
Got you.
You know what I mean? So I think that had I been in an environment that was nurturing and, where I felt accepted and loved and cherished and safe, I would have just been Heather. Just a girl.
Just a girl.
Just a girl that, wants to love on people, but also is about tough love. Because I'm going to give it to you raw. You know what I mean? But not being afraid to be tough and raw for fear of
running people away,
pushing people away. Exactly.
Respect.
Exactly.
That is I'm glad that you've been delivered. I can totally relate. It's exhausting. And sometimes you don't even know that you're people pleasing because you've been doing it for so long.
It's like breathing.
That's all you know.
Yeah. That's why recovery requires intentionality.
Come on.
It does. Because once you have developed coping skills, you use them for everything. Mm-hmm. So to kind of go back a little bit to the story about me being in Africa and, being put in the ice cubes, and getting the shots and things like that I could feel on my bone. Mm-hmm. One of the things that my father taught me how to cope with the pain was to go somewhere else in my mind, to numb myself. He would just go somewhere. He would just go somewhere else in your head, so you don't feel the pain. Little did he know that was my drug of choice, disassociation, So anytime I felt uncomfortable or felt pain, I would disassociate. That ultimately left me numb, emotionally numb, a flat face, I would only have emotional reactions when something was really, 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 really funny, like obnoxiously funny, or really, 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 really sad. Mm-hmm. There was not too many emotions that I experienced in between, those things. Otherwise, my baseline was sadness.
Wow.
Yeah, my baseline was sadness.
That's a lot for a child to be dealing with by themselves. Was there anyone that just made you feel seen? Was there anyone that you felt was your safe space?
At that point, because I learned that skill 6-7 years old, if there was, I don't even know that I would have recognized it.
Wow.
Because what I did learn early is that I had to protect myself. Mm-hmm. And that if a person was well-intended or not, I wasn't going to allow myself to be subjected to the possibility of them not. Mm-hmm. I had a plan. I had an exit plan. And it was all in my brain. Mm-hmm. I might not have been able to physically protect myself, but I could mentally protect myself. Mm-hmm. And there was an incident where I did something. I was not that long back from Africa, and I did something I wasn't supposed to do. I touched something in my grandma's house because we were living in my grandma's house, and I can't even remember what it was, but it was wrong. Whatever it was, I got in trouble, and so I got a spanking. I didn't cry.
That made him even more mad.
Yeah, so it was like, oh, you're going to cry. You're wrong. I'm not going to cry. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to cry. They spanked me. Now nowadays that would be considered abuse. Right. They spanked me until I cried. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And for them, the way they described it, because it's my grandmother and my mom, and they were just like, something's wrong with her. Like and the way they described it to me is that there was a film that went over my eyes. Wow. And it said that scared the crap out of them. Mm-hmm. And so to hear me cry, for them, they said that they felt like I was like a baby being born, like waiting for a baby to be born. Wow. And that first cry, like, right. Because I
you were not even there.
Wasn't there. I wasn't there. And that's something that I battled with for years. And because they didn't have the insight to say, this girl is sick. She needs to go to therapy. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. We need to put her in therapy. Their therapy was spanking my behind until I cried. And I don't know if maybe they thought that cry was the breakthrough. Right. You know what I mean? In that time, mm-hmm. The cry was the breakthrough. Mm-hmm. But it just scratched the surface. Mm-hmm. That's all. It just scratched the surface. That was still my way of coping, with the upcoming uncomfortable situations that I would, be in. I was more talkative maybe after that, but it didn't make that coping skill go away at all.
Respect. the different coping skills that you had to pick up on, it's scary, but it's also phenomenal the way that the brain kicks into fight or flight.
Absolutely.
And that was just, you were protecting yourself. And I hear you when you're saying, you know, that was some mental stuff, that was, you were sick. Totally agree. But it kept you, for that moment, it's safe.
It was survival.
Yeah.
It was
gotta do what you gotta do.
survival, and I lived in that space and that state of mind for pretty much the majority of my, you know, child, teenage, you know, young adult, you know, mid-adult, survival mode.
Right. So going back a little bit, you mentioned you had this conversation with your mom. You're in your 20s, and your 3 children in at this time. But in total, today you have 4 children in total. You became a young mother.
I did.
You became a mother at 17, which is a struggle in itself, right? What was that experience like for you? But before you answer that, can you say with the feelings of loneliness and, you know, not being seen, do you feel like you were looking for something outside of the home when you first met your child's father when you were 17, so young? Do you feel like he was giving you what you were missing, what you were looking for? Like, how did that all come into play? Because today we try to stress, you know, people to hold off, you know, before they lose their virginity, especially before you have kids. What was it he was giving you that made you feel vulnerable, feel open, feel seen, feel even safe maybe in that moment?
So the journey after being in Pittsburgh with my mother, well, my grandmother at that point, and just really rebelling. I was rebelling against everybody. Like, at this point, I don't care about anybody. Like, y'all truly don't care about me. So I'm just not dealing with any of this. So my uncle came into town, and he's like, look, she can come with me to Harrisburg, because I don't know what's going on here, but it doesn't seem to be good. So she's going to go with me to Harrisburg. And that's where I met my oldest daughter's father. And, you know, asking what he brought to me, I saw him and he saw me. You know, I remember one time we were talking about something, and he was like, look, like, I'm really into you, you know. And I'm like, I'm just a kid, you know, like, I'm not looking for anything that serious. But he said, you know, if you don't stay with me, I'm going to commit suicide. And I'm like, ooh.
Oh my God.
I said, that's something that is above anything that I can do. And if you're at that point, you probably need to go get some help that I can't give you. That's bigger than me. So at 16, I knew that those tactics weren't going to work for me.
Come on now.
You know, and he knew that it wasn't working, you know, either. So he pulled back, never did that again, never said anything like that again. And just approached me in a different angle, a more softer angle, a more caring, protective nature approach, you know, which that's what ended up ultimately drawing me into the relationship, you know. And so to say that today that I'm just a girl, you know, that just wants to be taken care of, and look, that ultimately was what was the buy-in for me in a lot of my relationships. You know, show me that you love me, show me that you care, you know, be tender, be soft, because everything prior to that was hard, like hard, mean, you know, uncaring. You know, so to get me in, you need to be kind to me and loving towards me. And that would get me in. That would draw me in. Now, what happened afterwards was dependent on me. Right. How long I stayed was dependent on me. Because it was like, okay, life is not about just good times and good moments and good experiences. There's going to be some hard times, you know. But my capacity and my bandwidth to deal with mean, nasty, hard stuff was limited. And I didn't understand that. I didn't understand that it was limited.
Mm-hmm.
So I was a runner.
Right. When you got pregnant, given the type of relationship that you have with your mom at this point, what was that conversation like? How was it after that, even staying with her during your pregnancy? What was that like for you?
Well, like I said, I left my grandmother's. My mother was still in Chicago.
Okay, right.
I had come back to Pittsburgh after I graduated from middle school. I was living with my grandmother in Pittsburgh.
Right.
So, and our relationship pretty much just fell apart. She still tried to stay engaged because she was, my mother, she was providing my medical insurance, stuff like that. But my admiration, those glasses, those rose-colored glasses had completely come off, been thrown away, So by the time I moved to Harrisburg with my uncle, there was a lot of, hey, you need to talk to your mom. You need to, make things right with your mom. And I was like, no, I don't have to do anything. I don't need to do anything, and I'm not going to do anything. So a little bit more adamant about my feelings, and when I got pregnant, and it was kind of like, oh my gosh, out of all the other things that we're dealing with, now she's pregnant. This child that we all didn't really want to deal with. Nobody really wants to deal with her. Now she's pregnant. Oh my gosh, what are we going to do? So then they go back to her. I'm like, okay, like, this is your child. This is your problem. Like, this, we said we would hold on to her for a minute, while you get yourself together, but now she's pregnant.
Right.
We don't want to deal with this. Grandma's like, she can't come back here. My uncle was dealing with his own battles, so she was like, well, are you going to come back here? And I'm like, no. She's like, well, if I let you come back, will you stop having sex? And I was like, no. Like, what kind of compromise is that? Like, at this point, I had no respect. Because to even respond to her like that, that's not me. No matter what she's done, I've always tried to maintain respect, because that's what you love your mother and your father, right? Honor your mother and father. That was what I was taught. But the stuff was, everything was just falling apart the way it was. I was just like, nah, not this mother. Maybe some other mother figure, someone, but not this mother. She is not a mother, right. So I turned that down, and ultimately my grandmother did let me come back, to live with her. And so I came back to Pittsburgh to live with my grandmother. But I knew that I wasn't wanted there. She didn't want to deal with that, and with the help of one of my aunts, I ended up getting into a shelter. I ended up signing myself into a shelter for young women, young pregnant girls. Awarded myself to the state for them to take care of me. It was a process.
Right.
I don't know how I figured it out. I had minimal support from my church community. I was a member of Robin at the time. So there were a few people that, knew me as a little girl, and tried to support me and everything. But for the most part, I was in that house day after day, trying to figure out my life, writing things down, making lists. My aunt helping me make some calls and things like that. Enrolled myself back into school because I had to go, I was still in high school. So I left Harrisburg and enrolled myself back in school because literally nobody was doing anything. Nobody said, oh, well, we got to get her back in school. We got to get her an appointment set up to make sure she's okay. Nobody was talking to me at all, So I had to take it upon myself to do it myself. And that was what I did. And I don't know where that frame of mind came from, where that resilience came from to do all that. But I literally remember walking down the South Side because I was at some point, they was like, well, you need to get an attorney from Kids Voice. How do I do that? Well, you need to go to the South Side and go down there. So I remember where Kids Voice was when they first opened up, when they first became, an entity. And if anybody does, if nobody knows what Kids Voice is, it's a legal services for kids that are in the system. And they go to court and they advocate for you. Right. So they said, okay, you're a ward of the court. you have to go down and get a kid's voice attorney. Okay, go down there, sign the paperwork, like everything I was doing myself. I can't remember if I had a caseworker or where the caseworker was or what the situation was. I just knew that I had gone to court and I was awarded the court.
Right.
Because nobody wanted to do anything with me, and they put me in the group home. So then I became, guardian. The group home was a guardian of me once they had a spot open up.
Well, luckily, listening to your story, things within the social service field have changed so much.
Yeah.
You had to go through all of that. Unfortunately, you should not have had to deal with all that as a child.
Yeah.
You shouldn't have had to navigate those spaces as a child. But just like with all of other things, someone has to go through it before we could change the system.
Yeah, absolutely. And that, as a social worker, because that is what I am, I realized that that's where resilience kicked in for me at that point. The adverse events of my life kicked in the resilience because I had to survive. I had to figure it out.
Yeah.
Because everybody had abandoned me. Everybody was mad at me. Nobody liked me. And, that's one of my biggest fears is that nobody likes me. And so now the whole family doesn't like me and nobody wants to deal with me. Total rejection. So now I got to depend on me to figure this thing out.
Wow.
And I did because I was left with no choice but to figure it out.
That's usually how it be.
Yeah.
When you don't have no options.
You gotta figure it out.
Come on now.
And so you become your own protector, your own provider. And that was what it is. And I was making my own choices, but I was still a kid.
Right.
I was still scared. And I had all these things happening to my body that I didn't understand what was going on because I'm carrying a baby. I had to go back to high school, to the peers that were treating me so badly, before. Now I'm meeting up with them in high school. They're just older versions of of who they were when I was in grade school. You know what I mean? So they weren't kind, and it's like, oh, Heather's pregnant. Oh my gosh, and the whispers and the rumors, but
especially back in them days, getting pregnant, right?
Yeah, but again, finding an adult. My vice principal was actually, really supportive of me, during that time. And I would always just be around adults. Anybody that made me feel safe, I would spend, time with them. At the group home, I found somebody that I felt safe with at the group home, a couple of residents, a couple of adults, try to develop relationships and stuff. But, it was scary, and I felt alone. I was scared and I felt alone. But I had to figure out something for me and my baby.
You're navigating life and you're making these connections with other adults, but you still don't have that relationship with your mom. How do you think the type of relationship that you did have with her affected the soon to come relationships that you had with friends and with people who you're dating, boyfriends, being married? How do you think that, because our families and the people who are in our circle as we're coming up, they're teaching us how to be the people we're going to become. They're teaching us what are healthy relationships or they should be. How would you say how you were brought up, how it affected the relationships that you were trying to develop in a good, in any way? How did it affect it?
My uncle that I went to go live with in Harrisburg used to say to me all the time, he said, and my childhood nickname was Queen. He said, Queen, you're always looking for love in all the wrong places. And so that's how it impacted my relationship, how I went into relationships. I was looking for love. I wasn't necessarily looking for a boyfriend, a friend, a mother figure, or whatever. I went into these relationships looking for love and acceptance. Someone that just cared about me. Someone that cared enough to say, you know what, I got this. What's going on? Come on. Come over here. I got you. And I ultimately experienced a lot of disappointments going into relationships, looking for that type of love that I felt like I should have had from my mother. So it was just a disappointment after disappointment after disappointment. But at some point, I think I just stopped caring about that and just really put my focus in on my baby. And so whatever I learned or whatever was part of just who God made me be as a person, because I'm a generally caring, loving person, I just put that into my baby. Decisions that I was making was about my baby, not about me necessarily, but about my baby being okay, being safe. If I was okay as a result, that was a bonus. But my baby got to be okay, So when given the opportunity to decide whether or not I wanted to go into independent living, independent living, or go to another group home with my baby, or get a voucher to go into housing, into the projects, I chose to go with a foster parent.
Nice.
And I chose that I needed more nurturing. I needed more caring for. I wasn't ready to be out there by myself
17,
in no apartment at 17 years old with a baby. I wasn't ready for that. I knew that. And so I chose for myself to, go in a foster home. And so they placed me with a foster parent that was willing to take me and my baby.
Because, and I'm sure at that time, it wasn't easy finding a family that would take in a baby. You're a baby yourself, a baby with a baby, right? A child with a baby.
The statistics show, first of all, that teenagers are the hardest to place. African-American teenagers are even harder to place, especially African-American boys. So I hit a lot of checks. I was a teenage African-American girl with a baby. So the pickings were slim. But I operated as if I had choices. I operated as if I had choices, and they were asking me, well, what type of foster parent do you want? And I'm thinking, y'all really care? But I told them, I said, I want someone who is involved in church, someone who is kind. I had some criteria. Yeah. They asked me. I figured, why not? Let me give them a little bit. And they found me Betty Johnson, that was willing to take me in, who had previously taken in another mother and her child. And I think it was the first time she'd taken in, or the young lady got pregnant while she was there. I can't remember what the scenario was, but she had recently, aged out. And so there was a place for me at her house. And that's where I ended up going. That's where I ended up being placed. Wow. As a foster child who was a ward of the system with open with CYF case, I was placed in foster care with a woman that was willing to take me and my baby.
Wow. God bless her. God bless anybody who do the work.
Yeah.
Housing the unhousable. It's so needed. Because that scenario could have, not just young women do it all the time. Black women, we figure it out. We do. But she didn't have to.
She didn't have to. And considering what I was faced with, I could have very well fell through the cracks. Now, we talk about resilience, and I was pushing myself. But at the end of the day, I still was only 17 years old. You know what I mean? I still needed parenting. I still needed to be parented. I still needed guidance. I still needed support. I could only do but so much with what I did do, which was a lot, to be honest, but I still needed, I knew I needed. I was in need. I was needy. One of the words I hate to use and associate with myself, but I was needy. You know what I mean? So I allowed myself to be helped.
Good.
At that time in my life, and I needed it. And it was one of the best decisions that I made for myself and my baby was to go into foster care and for them to find her, and she allowed, so all those dynamics were together in me and my daughter's favor, and still to, just celebrated her birthday, on the 1st of May, and I put a post up and, just in honor of her because she's since deceased. But there's never a time that I don't think about the impact that she had on my life.
She had a standpoint. Good.
Because she was a covering that I didn't know I needed, and which lasted long after she passed away. And there were still people that knew her. They said, "You're Betty Johnson's girl, right?" You're for her father.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Respect.
Yeah.
Respect. You've been through, at this point, we're talking about your first child and her father. But, with life experiences, you meet other people. And you were struggling about like what love looked like for you. When it comes to dating and friendships, do you feel like you were you were coming across the same kind of person?
Oh, I had a type.
Okay.
Yeah, I had a type. Like I said, the initial drawing was you showed Heather that you liked her, that you thought she was nice, that she was a good girl, she was pretty, she was worth spending time with. And yeah, eventually I will come around. So that was the guiding force in a lot of decisions that I made and how I moved in and out of relationships for a long time.
Respect. And a little further down the line, you were able to meet an individual. You've been married, and you've also had to deal with the divorce. Going into your marriage, what did you believe love or partnership was supposed to look like?
I don't know.
That's so fair. That is so fair.
I really don't know. I think that I read a lot of romance novels as a kid. I don't know what I thought a marriage was supposed to be. I just know I wanted to feel safe. I wanted somebody to live this life with where I didn't have to live it by myself. And so again, looking for love in all the wrong places, looking for something that might have been unrealistic because I was looking at it from a lens of a broken child that had been abandoned, neglected, mistreated, told and showed that she was unwanted. So I just wanted to be wanted. I went into a lot of friendships and relationships, just wanted to be wanted. That's not a healthy way. Those are not health. Those ultimately are not healthy relationships. Even if they start off healthy, the need, the unfulfilled need that presents itself in those relationships ultimately comes up and roots its ugly head and says, we're not okay. We're not getting our needs met. We need to go somewhere else now. We need to find some new, some new pasture, some fresh pasture, because this is not getting it. Right. We're not okay. Right. We're not okay. And so that internal voice would, ultimately wait for the other shoe to drop before separating from a relationship. So by the time I left my first husband, I was still on that journey, seeking something that I didn't even know where I was going to find it, but I knew it wasn't there, and it wasn't there. So, I came into that relationship with one child and left out with three. And now I'm a single mother of three children.
Of three, right.
In my early 20s.
What would you say after being married twice? Would you say the reasons for your decisions for the divorce for both marriages were similar, or were they completely different? And did you go into both relationships, even though it's years apart now? Did you, because you said you were still working, you still probably had more work to do before you got into this relationship, your next marriage. What was the determining factor that, even though I still got work to do, I know what's wrong with me, but I can't deal with you? How did you decide that it was enough, you were done? And it doesn't even have to be dramatic. Like, it just...
I think that ultimately I knew. I knew that I was looking for love still in all the wrong places. I knew I wasn't going to ever get that need met.
Wow.
So the resolve is that I'm being unfair. I'm really being unfair to people that I'm in relationships with, because I'm looking for them to do the impossible. Wow. What I needed was within me. And I needed to tap into that and figure out what that was. I knew that I was being unfair. I knew that I was continually putting pressure and expectations and my neediness on someone else. And then that would be the setup, because I'm not going to get those needs met.
Right.
Even the person that is the champion and wants to, like, I dig you, I want to do anything and everything for you. I'm asking you to climb Mount Everest. And that's not fair. That's just not fair.
Well, what part of you do you think had to change for you to be ready for the next chapter in your life? If after realizing that you're putting some unrealistic expectations on people, and what about you had to change, and possibly that you're still working on, because you're single right now. Correct. And I respect that, you know what I mean? Because you're realizing these things about yourself, and we complain about heartbreak, but we don't want to be on the other end hurting someone.
Correct.
So what is it that you realize had to change, you've changed, or you're still working on changing?
I realized that I needed to breathe. I needed to breathe. Not only am I dogmatic with other people, I'm dogmatic with myself. So it wasn't about just putting unrealistic expectations on others. I was putting unrealistic expectations on myself. I was not being kind to myself. I was very easily able to point out how people were not being kind to them, how they were being unkind to themselves, and how they weren't taking care of themselves, and how they weren't breathing, and how they weren't showing themselves grace and mercy and stuff. Wasn't recognizing that all the things that I was seeing in other people was exactly what was mirroring in my life. And I had to learn how to breathe. And by taking in full cleansing breaths, I was able to get oxygen to my brain. And once I was able to get oxygen to my brain was able to function a little bit better each breath I took than it was the last breath I took.
Respect.
Because I was able to think more clearly. Have you ever been in a situation where you just couldn't get your full breath, maybe an asthma attack or underwater or something like that? Maybe somebody put a blanket over your head and you just like anything that is obstructing you from being able to take a full breath and then inhale fully, you get dizzy. You might get a little lethargic after the incident. You're gasping, for breath. I lived many years on minimal oxygen to my brain.
Gosh, right. I feel you on that.
When you're existing off of a sense of survival. You know, you haven't taken the time to even process what you have been through and how those things have impacted your life. And you're just going one day after another, putting one foot in front of the other, just moving, you know, because you feel like that's what you got to do.
Right.
You don't have time to stop. You know, one of the things our mother said is that nobody cares about how you feel. The train is not going to stop for you to get off, for you to have a moment. You want to, if you get off, you'll be left behind.
Right.
Otherwise, stay on and keep on rolling until you figure it out. Fake it till you make it.
So from all of the things that you've been through and you were going through, when you look at your children, how would you describe who you were as a mother during that stage of your life?
Not present. Disassociated. Going through the motions. I loved my children. I loved my children. I loved, you know, being a mom, you know, having them. But the hardship of being a single mother and all the things that I was still struggling with and battling with outside of being a mother still made it so that I was using my coping skill, which was to disassociate, you know. And unfortunately, that made me not a present parent, you know, an emotionally absent parent to my children. And by the time I had my third child, my depression was very, very, very bad. You know, I probably struggled with some postpartum depression, you know, during that time. I just remember it just being a really dark space for me. And so that, and even during the pregnancy, you know, I was dealing with a lot of depression. So
specifically dealing with your third child, this is when like your depression was kicking in.
Yeah, this was when I really recognized, you know, how deep my depression was. And I came across an article that talked about postpartum depression and the hormones that are given off to the baby and how that ultimately affects the baby. And I took that to heart because then I was like, oh, my baby. Like I couldn't control what was happening, you know, as far as my depression was concerned. But reading the article made me prepared of how it could potentially impact my baby, my unborn baby, you know. So it was no surprise that, you know, her and I struggled, you know, in our relationship because I was even less, so if I wasn't present for my older two children, I was even less present.
Wow.
With her. And she felt that.
Yeah.
She felt that.
Respect. And now as an adult, how was that once she was able to like speak up for herself and verbalize that? How was that for you guys' relationship? Was it a hard pill to swallow? How did you accept what she was feeling? Because again, you were a little bit more present with your other children, so you really haven't had to have that heart-to-heart conversation with them. And did you even recognize it before she said something?
Interestingly, I wasn't more present with the older children. I just wasn't as deep into my depression as I was. You know, I was still disassociating, you know, but they had each other. You know, the older two had each other. The oldest one had family, cousins that were her age. So, you know, like the extended family kind of helped, you know, mitigate some of the things that I was dealing with. But at the time I had my third, I was isolating more, you know, didn't want people to see how bad things were, you know, with me. And then I figured that they were all together. So they had each other, no matter what, they had each other. But the impact of the depression on her, just even the genetic makeup, you know, she was different. She was quiet. For the longest time, nobody thought she spoke, you know. And so by the time she finally got a voice, she was able to put into words what her siblings experienced, but didn't really have to face because they had each other
Right.
and they had the extended family, you know, type thing, where, you know, my third child was like, I'm not dealing with any of y'all. I don't really, you know, want to deal with any of this, you know. And it impacted our relationship.
Wow.
You know, because she felt like, where were you? I needed you. You know, I was the quiet, you know, vulnerable one, and you weren't there. You were working, and when you weren't working, you were sleeping.
Right.
You know, and I was just there by myself with these two older crazy ones.
Wow. I love the fact that you guys have been able to talk about that because, you know, sometimes mother-daughter relationships, they just fall by the wayside. With abandonment and trauma, it's just there's so much to unpack. And you've been able to, I still feel like just scratch the surface. What have you learned about your recovery? And for the person who's listening in, how can they begin to have some healing, start working on their own recovery? What is it they possibly need to learn about themselves as opposed to how much they place on other people so that they can begin to heal from trauma, heal from abandonment, and just start living their life healthy, mentally, spiritually? Who's listening in? What do they need to hear right now?
What they need to hear is that the mirror is one of the most important tools that you can have in your arsenal because it makes you have to look at what's really going on, what's really in your face. People can tell you all day long, oh, you're this and you're that, or you didn't do this, or you didn't, or you're not this, or you're not, or you think you're this and you think you're that. But the mirror is the telltale, you know, and I mean, deep soul searching mirror exercise where you're looking deep into your eyes. There was a time that I couldn't even look at myself in my eyes because I couldn't handle the pain that I saw in my own eyes, you know. But doing that work made me realize that I needed help. I needed help with my recovery process. Everything that I had done up until that point was by the grace of God. That I was alive, that all my children were alive. You know, it was by the grace of God, you know. But if I really, really wanted to heal from the trauma, you know, the abandonment, I was going to have to look in that mirror and do that work, that personal, deep, wrenching, scary work, you know. And like I said, fear and feeling unsafe was one of the things that I, you know, avoided. But that's when you're doing this work, you're going to be by yourself. People are not going to understand what you're doing because your process looks weird as ever.
Right.
Like weird as ever.
Right.
People, what are you doing? I got to figure this out for myself.
Period.
And this is the time when being selfish is okay. Because it's not selfish. You're loving on yourself.
Respect.
So I learned that the love that I was looking for in all the wrong places, I needed to give it to myself. I needed to parent myself. I needed to love myself through grace and mercy and tenderness. So everything that I was looking for from other people, I needed to do it for myself.
Come on.
I had to develop a regimen of self-love.
Respect.
And that was, it has been and continues to be, you know, my process. It wasn't easy getting here. You know, there are a lot more bumps and bruises along the way. But acknowledging that the need was there, you know, now I'm okay being needy. Because the bottom line is I was a kid that was neglected and abandoned and mistreated. Those I can't change. I can't undo those things.
Respect.
So I'm now okay with being someone that is just a girl that needs to be loved and needs to be cherished. And if I'm the first line of defense to give myself that love and that caring. And so when I listen to my body and my body says, we're not feeling it, and I'm like, okay, honey.
Period.
I listen to little Heather. I listen to her when she says, I don't feel like it. I want an ice cream cone instead. And I'm like, okay, let's make it ice cream.
Word.
I love on her. I love on her.
That was perfectly said. I love the piece that I can hear coming from you. And with this new transition, you're now a grown adult woman. What is it that Heather has accomplished? Where are you at in life? A lot of 17-year-old pregnant women don't make it. But you now have your bachelor's and you tell the people what you got going on. I can't give it justice.
Well, after telling myself that I was never going to be able to finish college, complete, I was never going to set myself up for failure or letdowns or anything like that. I finally, had an epiphany a few years ago and decided to go back to school. It was a lot of encouragement. A lot of other people saw things in me, but Heather didn't see what she needed to see in herself. And a mirror was put in front of me, and I couldn't deny anymore that, I needed to go back to school to really fully evolve into the person, that I am and that I'm becoming. Therapy played a big part in that process, So with a lot of anxieties and my blood pressure shot up high, I went back and I applied for school. I got my bachelor's degree. In 2 years, I was able to secure a new job, where they supported me through that process. And I'm now back in school pursuing my master's degree.
Come on now.
In social work. During that time, I also got certified as a life coach, and I'm in the process of getting my licensure as a doula, something that has been near and dear to my heart. Since I was pregnant as a teenage mom, I just was infatuated with, the amazing job that a woman's body does, bringing another human being into the world and the sacrifices that are made. And so, I want to be there to support other mothers on their journey, and so I feel like I can accomplish that through becoming a doula. So those are things that I'm doing. I'm, now a grandmother of 3 beautiful babies with, one on the way. And, having those little people gives me an opportunity to see my children, in a different lens, and to show up for my grandchildren in the way that I know without a doubt that I could not show up for my children.
Wow. Wow. That's beautiful.
And my children, my adult children, show a lot of grace and forgiveness and mercy to me because I shared my story with them. I wasn't afraid to share my story with them, although they say, Mom, we've heard this before. I'm like, no, I need you to understand that this was your mom's story. This is the why she showed up or didn't show up the way she did when y'all were growing up. And I can't undo it, but I can show up for you now. I can be that person now.
And I will say, as an adult, we do give our parents grace because we're looking back, now in my 30s, I can see I might still have been upset with my mom's decisions, but as a woman, I can see. I just want to say thank you, so much, Heather, for coming on, giving your raw, transparent story for people who going through what you've been through what you've been through, and possibly didn't get a chance to share their story. So again, thank you for coming to our show, sharing with everyone, and we just really appreciate your story. We really do. Thank you.
It's a pleasure being here.
And we will see you guys next time here on Raw Recovery, the Community. Peace.